Okay, hi guys. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
Good. How are you?
Very
Good.
nice.
Good to see you all. For anybody watching, we're laughing because we've been friends for many, many years. But I would love you guys to introduce yourself. Why don't you take a minute to tell us who you are, where you're from, what you're up to?
Sure. Joel Christensen, pastor at Elim City Church in Peterborough, Ontario. Expat from Montreal as well too. And this is my wife, Holly Christensen.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have much to say. That's all. Yeah.
Well, Holly, go ahead and finish what you're saying. I think Holly's currently working on her PhD in psychology, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's
I'm
exciting.
working toward that. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So just for everybody, if you're watching, I want to tell you a little bit about Joel and Holly. Val and I grew up in the same church, as many of you know, in a place called Verdun. And Joel's dad was actually pastor when I was younger. And even before that, Joel and I are born a year apart. And his grandfather was the pastor when we were born. And then when we grew up, his father took over the church. And then my father took over the West Island Church from his father. So you can imagine we've known each other for a long time. And then along the way, we both started dating and met the two lovely ladies you see to our side. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history. But not only are we sort of friends in ministry, we're true friends. So this conversation could get interesting and may require a lot of editing. So, guys, we want to just say hello, first of all. And the first general question I'll ask, and then we'll let it go free flowing, is how are things going for you as a family, as a couple, as a church during this whole COVID-19 pause? And what are you hearing and seeing from the Lord through all of this?
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, we also have 4 children, young children. So we have our oldest is only 7 years old, and it goes down from there. So we have young children with us that are now home 24/7, and 3 of them are in school. So we're supposed to be now we have online school too as well. So we're supposed to be doing an hour of school with them each day. So that's 3 hours of schooling that we're supposed to be doing with them. And on top of that, just, trying to entertain and make sure they don't kill each other, and just the daily routines, right? So, I mean, that's not easy. And it'd be nice to say it's all rosy and everything's perfect, but it's difficult. It's hard. But in it all, at least we're with our family, and it's not bad. It's just taxing in that we don't have a whole lot of free time anymore to do, any of the things that we love to do, just even us as a couple. It's not easy to find time to just focus on each other, where we're just busy almost 24/7. Basically, we start the day at 6:30, and the kids are in bed at 7, but really 8 o'clock. And by that time, you're exhausted, obviously, right? So that part's difficult, but still, it's still nice to be around. At least we're not, alone. I feel really bad for people that are obviously alone in this crisis. That would be a horrible thing to be going through right now. So, we're not bored, but we're not restful either. So,
And you have a little puppy.
we have a little
Throw
puppy.
him into the mix. Yay!
So you thought 4 kids under 7, global pandemic, let's get a puppy.
Just makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So our youngest is potty training right now. So we're potty training a little girl and a puppy at the same time. So that's
Good.
A lot of similarities.
Might as well. Yeah.
might as well, right? I don't know, from a spiritual point of view, just in terms of the people that are in our churches, people are pretty positive, I got to say, in our assembly. A lot of them are very mature Christians. So, their faith is strong. They're not shaken too easily. And that is encouraging. So, from that perspective, seeing them at the faith level that they're at is encouraging to me, because it shows a real maturity in Christ. And I really appreciate that. And it's opened my eyes as well, too, to the type of people that we have in our assembly, that they're not easily discouraged. They're not easily shaken. They are strong in the Lord. And that's obviously, as a pastor, it's something that you want to see, your flock.
Yeah, it kind of lightens the load for you too, right? It makes a little less burdensome.
Yeah,
Encourages you. Yeah.
Exactly. And the city itself, I mean, the city is doing good. We're at around, I think, 58 cases right now, but I think close to 40 of them are recovered. So, I think we're over the worst of it now. We're going to probably see we're probably going to be on the decline of that curve. So, Even as a city, that people are encouraging the small businesses and trying to keep them afloat the best that they can, and people are being pretty respectful of the rules and everything as well too. So overall, it's pretty. I'm impressed with the city. I'm impressed with our assembly, and yeah, it's doing. We're doing good. Let's just put it that way.
Great. I was wondering, Holly, with your training to be a psychologist, a doctor, what do you think is going to be, if you say the mental cost or the outcome after this? A lot of people are saying that there's going to be a lot of mental health adjustments because it's a weird time. Nobody's ever faced anything like this before,
Yeah. I think right now a lot of people are working through a grieving process, because they've lost so many things in terms of, their jobs. They've lost their ability to connect with their family, to even just go to the store like they used to be able to. So there's like a grieving process that's going on just in the basic things of life. And I think that a lot of people associate grief with losing a loved one, but it's losing anything that matters to you and that's important to you. So I think that's one thing that I can see a lot of people are struggling with. And then I think there's going to be like some post-traumatic stress that happens after all this kind of comes to a close, because we're in that survival mode where we're doing what we can do just to get through each day. But then afterwards, when all of this kind of slows down and we get to the other side of it, I think that's when people will begin to really process what did we just endure for the last, however many weeks and months. And there's going to be some work to be done in all of that.
Yeah. It's funny because I know you were talking about the grieving process, and it's crazy because you think about, people who are on their own and going through these issues, and it's obviously going to be a big thing that they're going through right now. And like you say, post-traumatic stress after that. But it's so interesting that you say grieving. I hadn't thought of it, because I'm telling you, even in this process here, I've been temporarily laid off. I had an injury when all this pandemic started around in our area. And you guys kind of know, but I don't know if anyone listening to this later would know, like I went through a whole, I guess a grieving process too, because, I had lost the functioning of my vocal cords to sing. And that's something that I always identified myself as a singer, a worship leader. And one by one again, some of those things were taken away from me again. I didn't have, my job. I'm always out there trying to to motivate and encourage in my workplace. And then at church, it was to co-lead and be a lead worshiper. And all of a sudden, all of that I thought had disappeared.
Yeah.
And it was, I actually had a rough couple weeks at the beginning, because I really had to, I guess, go back into scripture and really remind myself of what my identity really is. And a lot of those things, I guess, naturally, yeah, they're real and they're important. But at the same time, I really had to remind myself about how when they say in Galatians, I'm a Christ child. I'm a child of Christ. I'm a child of God through faith. And I really had to remind myself that I had a value and I had a worth, I had a purpose, even though so much of what I thought was me was temporarily missing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, now you mentioned, I think that's exactly what it was. It was like a little grief process, actually.
I'm sure you're not, I'm sure this is happening all over.
I'm not the only one, for sure. It was just, I guess you think too, right? Because, I like to think of myself, we're always maturing, but at the same time, I like to think, okay, I'm I'm grounded. We've been through our own stresses, with illnesses and the family and all that. And, you're growing and you're God is strengthening you through all that. You think, all right, I can do this. And then, there was another lesson to be learned in all of this. So it was pretty.
I think one of the things too that I think coming from this, I think is interesting, even as believers, is those of us who are going full bore. Joel, you talked about going all day and so on. Yeah. I've actually talked even to my own boss. I said, listen, there's a core group of about, let's say 5 to 10 people at my company where I work that have been coming in every day and keeping things going. And I'm going to talk to my boss. I'm like, you know what? All of us who've been doing this, we all need to take a week off when things go back to normal. Yeah. I said, I don't think we're all just kind of head down.
You're survival
this happen,
right now.
Where everybody's in survival mode. And it's almost like I guess it's happened in real life too. It's happened to me once or twice in life, but you see even in movies where like a hero does something amazing, they fight, and they get to the end, but then they cry,
or you
right?
collapse.
They break down and cry because they're like, oh, like it's not even that they're sad. It's like your body just kind of, whatever. And I'm wondering how many. I'm thinking about like grocery store workers, security guards, and pharmacy workers,
nurses,
and especially healthcare workers. For sure, the healthcare workers, but we can kind of understand that. But even like orderlies, think about orderlies who normally aren't in the same pantheon. There's like normally in our mind is like doctors, nurses, and then it all just falls out. But you got to think there are people pushing gurneys around every time they touch a gurney. They're like, am I getting COVID-19?
Yeah.
And even when things return to what I've called normal, the normal, I wonder how that's gonna. I think in many ways, like you saw, post-war people have had an effect on the whole society. That this too will have a pretty deep impact.
Yeah,
definitely, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of this process, as you were saying, Val, too, a lot of everything's being stripped away, right? It's being brought right down to the raw. Like you're working hard, your hands are raw. Everything is just become really raw, and it's almost like you have to depend on skills you didn't know you had. You got to develop new calluses to do things you haven't done before.
And you know what? I think you have to trust in the simplicity of it all too, right? Right now, a lot of us, our church services are stripped down to like bringing a message or bringing a little bit of, some worship and all that. And we kind of have to trust God in that process where that simplicity there, actually, his spirit is just going to magnify that. But it kind of strips away a lot of the extra noise maybe we could have easily brought to our services and all that. Although God was, for the longest time, I think Holly, I had talked to you about this when we had done some worship together, even these past years, where, I always wanted it to be a little bit more, just being authentic, stripped down a little bit more. If you don't play the right note, you don't play the right note, but you've got it, your heart has to be there. I want your spirit right. I want you, before your God for an audience of one, right? And I think when we're in that vein, I think God does amazing things, and I think that's where he's really, everyone's saying now, it's going back to basics, going back to simplicity, and that's, it's really where I felt God had been bringing me, for the last little while. So it's confirmed that, and it's obviously going to be much, much more, but.
Yeah, it's what I preached on this morning. It's like, when we go back to normal, what are we going to bring with us? Like,
Yeah.
But what I was thinking about, I think we know you well enough to know that you agree with us that God didn't cause this, right? I think actually Pastor John preached that this morning. God didn't cause this, but what God takes something that's bad and turns it into a lesson, right? And I was just thinking about how so many things that we do as crowds, just think of things that we do as crowds, that's what's gone. And then I realized, wow, most of what we do involved leaving our home and going into a crowd and just becoming another voice in a crowd. And that's really what's been taken away. It's like I have to wait for everything.
Yeah, that's the sermon idea.
This just shows the length of friendship and how you guys know each other.
Say again, Joel, what were you going to say then?
A very similar thought.
I had an idea. It's not fully developed. It's really a straw man at this point. But the idea of being lost in the crowd is gone.
Yeah.
Right? Now, because everything's being stripped away, everything's been taken away. People that were used to being lost in the crowd, where they're more about their context than they are about who they are as a person. Even that's gone. Like now, you're forced to focus on yourself. And you're forced to look at yourself, not focus on yourself. A lot of people are focused on themselves, but we're forced to examine ourselves and be, self-aware of the things you need to work on, of who you are in your context, who your friends and family are.
Yeah.
All these things are being brought to an immediate attention, and I think God's going to use that.
Yeah, it's so true. I think the word I was thinking of when you were talking is like we're forced to reckon with ourselves.
Yep.
And right before COVID hit, 2 weeks in a row, I went to Montreal Impact games, the Big O. It was a Wednesday or Tuesday, 2 weeks in a row because they were in the Champions League. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's just like I went from being at this massive, the Big O, which is maybe ugly, but it's huge, with all these people, and then like it just came to an immediate stop. And then I'm wondering, like, I don't know about you guys, you thought about it. And I don't know if somebody came and gave me 2 free tickets to the Habs. I'm like, I don't even know if I'd go.
Yeah. What's going to happen to professional sports and all these things, right? Like it's
concerts, sports.
Everyone's going to think twice about.
But everything, like even like Canada Day fireworks or jazz festival or Just for Laughs or whatever you guys, Toronto International Film Festival, whatever. It's kind of like, really? I mean, can't we just do that from home? I think you might. But then how do we respond to that? Man, maybe you guys are doing online church now. We've been streaming for
a long time,
whatever, a couple of years. But like, how do we respond in the future when it's like, okay, everybody come back now? Because I think people still do crave that one-on-one connection. So
I feel something still missing, even though, I mean, we've been doing pretty well to connect with people, text and chat and all that. But I mean, I'm someone who I'm physical. Like I like to hug people, like virtually with puppies. But exactly. So like, I feel the difference right away. I can't wait till I can do that again. I mean, I might think twice at the beginning, but
I've held an unpopular position on all of this stuff in the past as well too, in terms of social media and things as well, is that we've lived in a virtual environment now for a number of years, and it's good. There's a lot of stuff that's added to our ability to connect with each other, which is fantastic. But I think this is also bringing us to the point where being solely virtual is showing the lack of connection with each other face to face. And I think that I think when this is all over, I think that the craving to be part of a community, to actually be face to face with people that care about you, that actually do love you and want to see the best of you and all that's actually I think that's going to be a huge thing for us that we can actually take advantage of as a church and be at the forefront.
Yeah, I wonder too, like to address your point before, how we ensure that when people come back into the crowd, that we don't make it so that they could disappear. You know what I mean by that? Like,
so they're not lost in the crowd.
Help them feel seen and recognized. I think that's going to be a challenge going forward as well. And there's normal church growth, small groups, and follow up. Like Val talks. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've talked to church people more the last month than I ever have. In terms of especially virtually texting, phoning, messaging, whatever. But I wonder, maybe this can bring the next question up. I wonder what you think God is telling us as leaders and as church people. What's He awakening us to right now? Anything else based on what you've already said?
What He's awakening us to, like
there's something new or something that we've forgotten that maybe He's speaking to us about.
I just think the idea of relationship, we throw the word of relationship around all the time, right? Like it's something that we're always saying, it's about relationship. But okay, if I think God may be saying, okay, if it's about relationship, let's take everything away, so it's just Jesus, and let's see how strong that relationship is.
Yeah. I really think that Christian consumerism is being dismantled through all this. And I'm not that sad about that, because I think we do need to get back to the basics of Christianity. We need to get back to the basics of what it is to have a real relationship with God and then a real relationship within the body of Christ.
Yeah.
It's not based on all kinds of different ministries and these huge worship platforms and concerts and everything and conferences and all of that. Like none of that's really going to be able to happen probably for a couple of years or if ever. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know if that's such a bad thing, because I think we need to realize, what are we in this for?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
I mean, in our case, what does it mean to be apostolic? I mean, and that's really what, we've been thinking a lot about too. Like, what does it mean to actually be sent ones and to be going out and doing the work of ministry? And it just doesn't involve all that other consumerist part.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Not at all.
That's a really challenging word. I agree. I wonder, like you say, what does it mean to be a sent out one when you can't go outside?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question.
Yeah. Well, I think we're doing it. Church Online right now is part of that. I mean, that's the only way we can send out right now. So that's why that's our focus.
But I think it also affords us the opportunity, right, that when we can go outside again, we don't go outside the same way we did before.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think we are being brought back to what you were saying, to your point about relationship. I mean, the gospel is only real when it's demonstrated in our life to other people. And so again, like all these big, mega churches and all of these things, you might have to edit this out, but not to criticize any of that. It's all still really good, but it comes down to what you're modeling and what you're demonstrating to the people around you. If they see Christ in you, then that should be enough.
But I think more importantly, going back to the point you talked about for us, because really it's about what this means for us, is what does it mean to be a sent out one? What does it mean to be apostolic? It's something Joel and I were talking about, I think it might have been today, where we were talking about, I was fawning over Joel's editing skills of his videos or whatever, and then we were talking about ours and so on and so forth, and Joel said something like, something good about our team, Sunday and the guys and Mark and the guys at Transformation. And I quickly corrected myself and then sent it back to Joel and said, you know what? No, actually, it's our team. It's your team. It's my team. This is what we can do now. We have to start thinking differently now.
Yeah.
Right? It's not my team, not your team. It's our team. And I think maybe that's something that we've lost, or maybe we never had it. I don't know. But that's something worth looking forward to. Because in order to maybe survive in the new world, we're going to have to partner in ways we've never done before.
Yeah,
definitely. That means a lot more online stuff or virtual stuff. Well, then that's what it's going to mean. And if it means that, for example, somebody from Peterborough is going to do something for Transformation, and then somebody from Nova Scotia is going to do something for Peterborough, and whatever that means, or somebody in the States or Britain or whatever, maybe that's the future. I really think it is a part of it anyway.
Yeah.
No.
Collaborative, cooperative.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back, of course, the other day too, right? What is church all about? I hope it's the old phrase that you hear all the time is to make him known, right? And to glorify his name and to make him known, or however you want to look at it. Basically, the old Hillsong thing, what was it? Touching heaven, reaching earth, or something, or reaching heaven, touching earth.
Touching heaven, changing earth.
I don't want to, but you know what whatever, changing earth. Basically, giving glory to God, worshiping God, and then preaching the gospel to people.
Yeah.
Right. And what's that going to mean in the new world? Holly, I hadn't even thought about conferences. You know that when you said that, I hadn't even thought about.
Oh, really?
I'm sure that industry in the world, never mind church, is worth billions.
Yeah.
Joel used to go to Orlando all the time, right?
If you look at there was one, I saw a video a little while ago of a New Year's Christian celebration. I don't know where it was, but it was on the level of any other.
It was
major,
a Christian one.
Yeah. Like the giant screens, and this would have been a multi-million-dollar production, and that's not going to happen again anytime soon, right?
And now all these Christian music artists, they're doing raw worship right from their living room.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I think there's a recentering, like you're bringing things back to where it should be. And I think that's why, in a way, God didn't cause this, but he's permitting it, because there is going to be a lot of good things that come from it, just in terms of how the church sort of reorients itself, and it's going to come through a lot better. I think it'll be a more authentic demonstration of Christ.
I think so.
Yeah.
What are you most hopeful for about the future?
Of humanity?
Just in general. Your church, Peterborough, Canada, whatever you feel.
I'm hopeful that people will finally understand the importance of connectedness, of people. And, you see, I think, see everyone with the posters out saying, we're all in this together, hope, and everything you see that people are just kind of putting out there to say that we're one world going through the same thing. I think that's actually a very powerful message. It's lacking the Christ aspect of it. And I think my hope in it all is that it, again, points back to Jesus in some way, that there has to be something in all of this that that shows the glory of God. And my hope, my desire is that God really comes through in a major way to say that, that there's no doubt that God has moved in this season somehow, and that he's done something, to humanity as a whole, to the whole world. And I just want to see that Christ gets exalted in it all.
Holly, do you want to add anything?
I sort of agree with everything Joel said, but I guess the only thing else I would add to that is just I'd like to see there you go. I would like to see those that are sort of like not like halfway there, maybe like if you want to call them lukewarm. We don't really use that expression much, but anymore. But that kind of where it's like that dependence and desperation for God is not quite there yet. I mean, what we're seeing, we're having a lot of things stripped away and taken away. But I mean, here in our North American context, can we really totally be as desperate as some people are in other places where like for their very life depends on Jesus coming and intervening in their situations? And I guess I just like to see the sort of self-dependence and self-strength that we all have in our culture maybe get stripped away a little bit more. Like we need God. We do need a savior, and he's worthy of it, and he's back to what you were saying, Val, like I mean we're children of God. I mean, so I would like that reality to become something that most people or a lot more people would take on.
Well, and there's a reason too, right? That scripture says to not neglect coming together, the gathering of the saints, right? So there's obviously something there too, where maybe we've been taking certain things for granted, right? And maybe not fully, I don't know what the word is. I guess, like Joel said, to just, I hope we get more connectivity. I mean, in our place, we have a great, people are very warm, people are very loving, and they're interested and supportive. But I think there's another level everyone can get to. Absolutely. Right? When we're going to come together with that type of expectation again, and not take those little things for granted again, I think that's where God's going to move. Right? And there's something new and fresh that's going to come out of that. I can't wait till we can worship together in one room.
Yeah.
Right?
It'll be really celebratory, I think.
Oh yeah. You know what? I can't wait till you and I can do something again together. Like just like
at a distance.
No, me and Holly always end up hugging somehow on stage. I don't know how it works, but it does. But I'm really looking forward to it. There's got to be something when we all can be like, God keeps bringing me back to like the upper room experience, and bring me back to Acts 2 all the time. And I think, I think when we're all going to genuinely be able to come together and worship, and we have to acknowledge that like his will is going to be done over this entire earth. We say it in our prayers. We say it as we, every time we finish our prayers. Thy will be done and thy kingdom come. So he's setting up this grand masterpiece of something going on here. So I think when we come together now, not taking for granted that everyone can come together again and worship, there's going to be something different. There has to be. Yeah. There has to be.
Talking about expectation, yesterday we had a Zoom prayer meeting with the people from church, and we were just going around like in in order.
Grid order.
A grid, whatever the grid is. And got near the end, and one of the newer members of the church who just had a baby who was born with some complications, right? He was asking for prayer for the baby and stuff, and we were for sure doing that, believing God for healing in their case. But everybody had prayed, excellent. But then this newer guy, he comes and he just blows out this prayer about like basically flipping expectations. I can't remember exactly the words, but if I was to summarize it, he was basically saying, take this and turn it into revival. And I almost checked my own spirit, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? You know what I mean? And he was bang on, you know what I mean? And because God takes the bad things, right, and turns them into good things.
Well, but look at it, right? You're saying like he's gone through something like his recently, and And it's a situation where only God can heal, can bring peace, can bring, I guess just
Whatever.
resolution to whatever they're looking for, right? And I mean, I can identify with that. You guys can identify with that. So, you know what? I think that's the revelation this has to be, that people need to get, right? That, like Holly said, like that simplicity, it's only God. We only have him. And, he's the only way, in terms of finding answers and moving forward and healing and being at peace, against loneliness or with your identity or whatever it is. So, I mean,
Yep.
that type of a prayer, that comes from somebody who knows what it is to have only him. And that's all you need. That's all he's the only one we need. And you've proven that, we've proven that. But I think if more of us can join in with a prayer at that level, that's gold. That's where God can work,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I wonder what you think. It's because, Joel, I think you used the word earlier, a lot is stripped away. The old Matt Redman song, when the music fades and all is stripped away, and I simply come
right now.
And I simply come, just to bring something. Hey?
No, sorry, this is me.
Yeah. So, but I wonder if that's what God, Joel, you're saying before, because we're having to come simply, we have no choice. Maybe technology is not totally simple. I mean, right now, you and I are talking in bits and bloops that are passing through space.
I know, and there are people over the world that don't have
amazing.
access
I mean?
to,
That's high-end technology, but for what we're used to. And I wonder if just like, I guess what I'm saying, and probably before when you were talking about mega churches, I don't think you're particular. If I could speak for you, you're not just talking about mega churches. You mean anything that seems a little bit manufactured and sort of showy. Right. And we all do that. We can all be guilty of that, from time to time, and all of any showiness we could have had is now gone. That's not to say the showy stuff is evil or wrong, but sometimes like, for example, if I'm in a stadium of 70,000 people, not too hard to lift my hands and worship the Lord, right? Because there's 69,999 people that are doing the same thing as me. They agree with me, and it's a little bit more comfortable. But when all of that is gone and it's like, I'm at home, and I think that's going to be, I hope, the birth of something new in a lot of believers. And also, Joel, I think you mentioned it before. I'd be interested to hear more of your thought on it. You said that it was, I don't know if you said birthing something new, but you said something to do with like how God would use the sort of, I don't know if you would call it loneliness that are people in, and then turn it into something, good afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think that it's what I find with a lot, even in Christendom right now, is that there's a real lack of self-awareness as well too. And I think that is something that has to come right now, especially for people that are alone, that are not communicating with other people, that are, I think people in Toronto, downtown Toronto, stuck in high-rise apartments, right? Like, and they can't go out. And they're stuck in a 800 square foot apartment by themselves. Like, what do you do? Like, you have to have some level of self-reflection and examine the things in your life. And my hope is that self-awareness will become more prevalent, and people will just improve overall.
Yeah, I think it speaks to us that we should be praying for those people, right? That I mean, we all know that God can speak directly to somebody who's never even thought about him.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Our prayers right now should be like those people who are holed up in their apartments watching Netflix 23 hours a day. Just break in, make them click on the wrong movie, make them, Google the wrong thing and find Jesus. I was thinking about my brother, right now, who's born again. I mean, he was flicking the channels in the States. I can't remember what state he was in. What led him to the Lord was flicking through the channels, and he landed on a prosperity preacher or whatever, one of these televangelists, and the guy just said a few words and spoke to him prophetically through a recorded television program.
Yeah.
This is in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. So what can God do now?
Exactly.
With all of our stuff that's out there and churches all over the world, giving out these encouraging messages. I think that's, I mean, if you guys, I know you guys agree, but maybe you can pick up on it. But I think that's what we should be praying for, is that God actually uses this loneliness, this isolation to speak by his Spirit into people's hearts and minds, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about even delivering stuff online. And what I was challenged with was the fact that, okay, we believe that we're pastors, you and I, you know, so you believe that God gives you a message, that God gives you something that you need to speak to people. And for the longest time, you know, I avoided putting stuff online of what that was, right? Like I'd speak it out in church and then it'd be vaporous. It'd be gone right after I deliver it, right? But now I'm thinking to myself, no, wait a second. If I actually record that, if I put it online, I put it out there, who's to say God can't use 30 seconds of it to minister to somebody else, you know, across the world that just randomly comes across it?
Yeah.
You know, it's not, has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the word that God has deposited in me, and I can't hide that. You know, you can't try to squirrel that away somewhere and not think about it. If God gives that to you, you have the responsibility of putting it out there, and what he does with it is up to him.
Yeah. And I guess that's placing that value back on who you are as a child of God.
Yep.
Right. So I think that's kind of where I've come back to.
Yeah. I mean, and too, there's the reality is, you know, Joel, I mean, you're hardly on social media, right, Joel, except from a church perspective. You don't have a lot.
I have none.
You and Val don't have any personal social media presence hardly at all. But there's also, if you will, a social cost.
Yes.
To putting they're putting yourself out there, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'll speak for myself. Like, I work and so on. I have, you know, hundreds of employees at the company I work for, and anybody could fall upon something I'm saying, you know, online and either be impressed or complain about it, you know. And I think we have to.
HR reports to you, that's okay.
What?
HR reports to you, so it's okay.
Yeah. or you know, but I think it's like, well, you know, is this something, you know, what is we call it in business, the return on investment or the opportunity cost?
Yeah.
You gotta put it out there, you know, and I mean, if you believe it, you believe it, you know, and you gotta believe that God will see you through. And I think it's time for us to kind of stand up and be willing to pay maybe some of that cost, you know.